Please rise. You may be seated, Deputy Mayor.
Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. And whereas 6 million were murdered, Roma, Gypsies, people with disabilities, and Poles were also targeted for destruction or decimation for racial, ethnic, or national reasons, and millions more, including gays, Jehovah's Witnesses, Soviet prisoners of war, and political dissidents, also suffered grievous oppression and death under Nazi tyranny. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and whereas the residents of the village of Ridgewood should always remember the terrible events and atrocities of the Holocaust, remain vigilant against hatred, persecution, and tyranny, and actively rededicate themselves to the principles of individual freedom in a just society. And whereas days of remembrance have been set aside for the residents of the village of Ridgewood to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as to reflect on the need for respect for all people. And whereas, pursuant to an act of Congress, Public Law 96-388, October 7th, 1980, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council designates the days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust, including the Day of Remembrance known as Yom HaShoah. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood does hereby proclaim May 5th, 2024 through May 12th, 2024 as Holocaust Days of Remembrance in the Village of Ridgewood, in memory of the victims of the Holocaust and in honor of the survivors, as well as the rescuers and liberators, and urges and encourages all residents of the Village of Ridgewood to work to promote human dignity and confront hate whenever and wherever it occurs. I'd now like to call up our Congressman Josh Gottheimer.
Good evening. Thank you to our pastors, Reverend and Rabbi, and Commissioner Zur, I believe, is here as well. Commissioner, thank you, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's an honor to join you all here tonight at the Temple to commemorate Erev Yom HaShoah with tonight's Interfaith Holocaust Remembrance Service. Last week, I had the privilege of co-hosting a bipartisan tour of the Holocaust Memorial Museum with my colleagues in the House of Representatives after we had just passed earlier that day a bipartisan piece of legislation clearly defining anti-Semitism for educational institutions in the United States. Walking through the exhibits that night, and I'm sure many of you have been there, underscored that we can never forget the impact that hate can have on any society. Hate corrodes, it divides, and it destroys. It's been more than 80 years since the Shoah, and yet we still see the same anti-Semitic, Jew-hating actions playing out on our college campuses, online, and in our communities. Discussing anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies that were used during the Holocaust are getting new life breathed into them. According to the Anti-Defamation League, there are more than 8,000 anti-Semitic incidents in 2023, 1 in 10 which occurred in our state. Bergen County, where we're sitting right now, leads the state in anti-Semitic incidents. It's unacceptable and not something I know that any of us are proud of. Tonight, we honor the 6 million lives lost in the Shoah, including members of many of our families in this room. May their memories be a blessing. We should always use tonight as an opportunity to recommit ourselves against anti-Semitism and all other forms of hate. Never forget and never again. Those aren't just words. They should be for us a rallying cry of what must be done every day, the actions we must take in our communities to make sure never again isn't just a slogan, isn't some words that roll off our tongue, but actually we ensure that we do everything we can to prevent not only another Shoah, but another October 7th. Sinning against hate is not a partisan issue. It's no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, if you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian. Interfaith gatherings like this emphasize that we must all unite together and remember that above all else, we are people and we're Americans. And we must all unite against hate and bigotry. We should strive to drown out hate with peace, dialogue, and understanding. Now, I'll just finish by saying this is not an easy time for any of us, for all Americans. It's especially not an easy time for Jewish Americans or Jews around the world. Right? We see what's going on college campuses, the ignorance, the screams to kill Zionists, the rallying cries behind Hamas, a terrorist organization, right? The intolerance, the way people are being treated in our communities, on our campuses, and in far too many neighborhoods in our country. So I think tonight is different, I feel like, than in other nights where we've come together on the evening before. And there's something, it's a very painful time for our community. And know that many of us will never back down, and I know you won't back down. Know that people in my job or Tracy's job, right, will never back down to hate. We will stand up every single day. I will continue to stand up every single day because of the 6 million. Right? You can't know our history and be quiet. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone knows the history. That doesn't mean everyone knows the facts. Right? They don't even know the facts of October 7th, of the 1,200 who were murdered, including Americans. 44 Americans were killed. 5 remain living hostages. Last week I met with hostage families in Washington. Tonight I spoke to Mr. Alexander, Idan Alexander's father. I talked to him several times, talk to the Alexander family every week. His son, Idan Alexander from Tenafly, New Jersey, remains a hostage. He was captured on October 7th, graduated Tenafly High School. His parents haven't heard from him since. No one's heard from him. No Red Cross visits, nothing. Right? So as Hamas continues to fire rockets and keep hostages and walk away from negotiating tables, let's remember that we won't stop until the hostages are released, until we truly, truly can say that we remember and we take our words and put them into action. So thank you. I want you to know that my door is always open as the only Jewish member of the congressional delegation in New Jersey, as the only Jewish member of the House Committee on Intelligence. Know that literally every day I'm working on this because I feel the weight of the Shoah, I feel the weight of October 7th, and I understand what we must all do as a community to make sure that people know and understand and stand up and speak out against all forms of hate against every American, regardless of their background or their religion or their race. So thank you. May God bless you. Thank you for giving me this moment to speak. May God bless your families. God bless our great country. Thank you.
Oh Lord, we thank you for the blessing of our community. We thank you for helping us to open these doors. We thank you for bringing friends together. We thank you for permitting us to form a family. Many of you know that I did my doctoral work in German history, and the thing that I've always found most striking about the history of the Holocaust is that Germany is not so different from our country. And it is a modern country, was a democracy, educated people, cultured people, and yet it descended to the lowest point that humans could ever find each other in. But there's one difference. One thing that didn't happen in Germany in the 1930s was these type of gatherings. Right? They didn't have interfaith commemorations coming together. They let interfaith work, but not like this. Right? And it sometimes takes tragedy to bring people together, but then a blessing that comes out of that when we rebuild is being able to form relationships that hold. Because the friendships, the binds, the relationships that we have here is the best guarantee that we will not see another catastrophe as the one that we commemorate tonight. This is our custom, and Ned is about to play background to it. We begin our evening with lighting candles of memory, and we light 7 candles, remembering 6 million Jewish victims and 1 million non-Jewish victims. And we do it through remembering individuals who are connected with the families of our community here, because we can't name millions of names, but we can name 7 names. We can look at the stories of 7 families and connect with both what was lost and what continues and what comes forth out of the ashes. This is the 38th annual Interfaith Holocaust Remembrance Service in Ridgewood. And we made a change last year at Westside Presbyterian Church where we have the bios printed in the program and ask you to read those bios, especially now when I call up the members of the family to light candles. And also, if you don't have a program or a chance, to please take one and read it on your way out. And we will also be sharing photos that go along with the bios that we read. And Dana, forward for the first candle. Jalinda. Jackie. Thank my colleague, Reverend Oler, who lit the last candle in memory of our dear friend Frank Schopp.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Tamara Freeman, and I have the honor of introducing our composer, Elliot Roman.
Good evening. My name is Elliot Roman. I'm the composer of the piece you're about to hear, entitled Pleased. It was admittedly difficult for me to compose a piece that was in any way connected to the Holocaust, because after such tragedy, what more could be said, what more could be expressed? So this piece is more of a reflection than a setting of Mordechai Gebertig's poem, Soon the Night Will Be Here. You'll hear elements of the text fragmented and echoed in all of the other members of the ensemble besides the narrator, who will be presenting this poem. I would like to thank Dr. Tamara Freeman for asking me to compose this piece, and to this ensemble who have worked very hard towards performing it today. Thank you all for listening.
So in everybody's program, if you turn to the inside, you will see the poem. And I'd like you all to join me in reading the poem, The Night Will Soon Be Here, Es fällt schon zu der Nacht, by Mordechai Gebertig, 1877 to 1942. Please begin. Soon the sun will set. Soon the night will be here. How happy and how carefree did I spend the day. Today was really my day. I used the time well. I am pleased with such pleasure and make music with joy and happiness. How I wish to enjoy some more of life's happiness and glory. Soon the sun will set. Soon the night will be here. Soon, soon, here be will night, the set will sun, the glory and happiness, life's of more, some enjoy, to wish I how. Well, time, the used I day, my really was today. Soon sunset, pleased, carefree, joy set, pleased. 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 Happiness and joy with music make. The night will soon be here by Mordechai Gebertig, 1877-1942. Soon the sun will set. Soon the night will be here. How happy and how carefree did I spend the day. Today was really my day. I used the time well. I am pleased with such pleasure and make music with joy and happiness. How I wish to enjoy some more of life's happiness and glory. Soon the sun will set. Soon the night will be here.
Would you please write? I'm sorry.
I believe it's fitting to mark this moment by thanking you for composing the piece for this occasion. We were honored to perform the world premiere tonight. and we want to thank you and applaud you for your talent and your efforts. Thank you very much.
I'd ask us now to all rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shochein B'Maromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Takat Chanfei Hashechina B'maloi Kedoshim Otzehorim Kezohar Akiya Mazehirim Lenishmor Kol Acheinu B'nei Yisrael Acherim Shenidbachu Bashoah Anashim V'Tav Shenekneku V'Shenisrefu V'Shenergu Shemasru Et Nafsham Al Kiddush Hashem Benganei Eden Tehei Menucha Vatamana Balarachamim Astireim Beseiter Knafecha Leolamim Utzeror Bitzeror Hachayim Nishmateihem Adonai hu nachalatam V'yanuchu v'shalom Ad mishkavotam V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens. To the souls of all the men, women, and children of the house of Israel and others who were slaughtered, strangled, and burned in the Shoah, may they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings, and may their souls be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated. Donald and Helen Fellows, whom we remembered earlier, longtime residents of Ridgewood, members of this congregation. They set up the endowment fund. It is now the Donald Helen Fellows Memorial Holocaust Education Fund that serves to support this event, the speakers that we're able to bring in. And I thank you for those who gave, and also in advance on the way out, our ushers will be holding two baskets where you can make donations there, gifts that will help us continue to do the special work that we do here tonight, and always special to have Adana, their granddaughter, with us here. Our speaker tonight, Reverend Peter Pettit, I was introduced to by my colleague, Rabbi Noah Marins, so I'd like to ask Rabbi Marins to come forward. He's no stranger to this pulpit, as he was a former rabbi of Temple Israel.
Thank you.
We're taller in those days.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine. It's always good to be back here and to see the Interfaith Holocaust Remembrance Service, which was founded in 1987 by a Methodist minister, a Catholic Monsignor, and me, to see that it is still flourishing, expanding, evolving, still very much alive, and giving new life to the commission, to the commitment that we have to remember the Shoah, and to do so in an interreligious environment, which makes the most sense if your goal is to prevent a future Holocaust. Our speaker tonight is the Reverend Dr. Peter Pettit. He is the teaching pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. I'll tell you a little bit about his background, but I'll tell you even more about who he is as a human being, someone I have known quite well since at least 2009. For 2 decades of the earlier part of this century, Peter was the director of the Muhlenberg College Institute for Jewish Christian Understanding. I suspect there's 1 or 2 Muhlenberg College connections in the room tonight. And for multiple decades, he was the leader of the Interreligious Theology Conference of an institution dear to me and many, the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. He did his undergraduate work at Princeton. He studied at the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia and earned his Ph.D. in religion, in Bible and early Judaism at Claremont Graduate University. He is a leading and activist member of the consultative panel on Lutheran Jewish relations and the principal writer of a recent volume which has become a role model for interreligious relations, for Christian understanding of Jews and Judaism, entitled Preaching and Teaching with Love and Respect for the Jewish People. He just completed yet again another course in which he teaches Jewish, Christian, other professionals in Holocaust education at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. But I was asked to introduce him tonight because, yes, I introduced him to your rabbi, Rabbi David Fine, because of my work in the national, international spheres of Jewish, Christian, and other interreligious relations. And our speaker tonight, Reverend Dr. Peter Pettit, is a leading role model in that field and a scholar who works with people like me and others to make this world a better place in the context of the interreligious engagement, particularly between Christians and Jews. In fact, Rabbi Fine, Dr. Pettit, and I have spent a lot of time together in order to achieve a new state of mind for the most infamous passion play, once the most infamous passion play on the planet, the Oberammergau Passion Play from Bavaria, Germany. All 3 of us, together with other scholars, have worked on reforming that play in cooperation with the director of the play, Christian Stuckel, who was awarded American Jewish Committee's Isaiah Award for its work, my organization where I do interreligious and intergroup relations. You learn a lot about someone when you spend a week with them in a former Nazi heartland, trying to tease out anti-Judaism from a play that began in 1634 and was reluctant to change after the Shoah. And a Lutheran and some Jews and some others came together to help it along. That was one of the great gifts of my professional life. That's how I became very close with the Reverend Dr. Peter Pettit. And I dare say that it is not irrelevant to the theme this evening about the Shoah. Lastly, I'll say, when I spoke at this service in 2019, I thought it was the most poignant moment since the advent of the service, because it was 6 months after the massacre at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh and 1 month after the massacre at Poway. My, how these years have given us perspective about what trouble can really mean. Reverend Dr. Peter Pettit, letting the Holocaust change me. Now is the time, my dear friend.
Thank you, Noam. I had never quite put it together that all of that work we did with the people in Oberammergau was actually to make something less famous. Rabbi Fine, Reverend Mack, friends here at Temple Israel and in Ridgewood. It is an honor to be with you. It is humbling always to be invited into the Jewish community and into an interfaith setting in remembrance of the Holocaust. In the stories that we've heard or that you have read tonight in your program, in the legacies of Frank Schott and Varian Fry, in the very shape of our world today, it's easy to see how much was changed by the Holocaust. And for so many, there was no choice in that change. Life, death, loss, survival, all were at the mercy of forces often unknowable and usually uncontrollable. For us here, 80 years on as we remember, things can be different. We note with honor and joy that Mrs. Unger is still with us, but is now the only eyewitness survivor among us. With each day, we all move farther from those traumatic events. The history remains, but as Michael Berenbaum has said, history reconstitutes itself as memory. And so we know this in our particularly Jewish and Christian traditions with which I'm most familiar. The events of the Exodus get reconstituted as a Haggadah and a Seder. The events of a Roman execution surrounding that execution get reconstituted as a Lord's Supper and a Good Friday and an Easter. And so the question comes to us 80 years on, how do we remember? Literally remember. member? How do we put the pieces together of this event that exploded into the middle of the 20th century, that shattered lives and communities, that extinguished a whole culture, that blew up the progress optimism of modernity? Well, one option is to study it, to analyze it, to probe it, to seek for reasons and some kind of meaning. And there have been conferences and debates galore. There are shelves and shelves and shelves of books documenting that way to remember. But among all those analyses on all those shelves, there's a literature written by Tadeusz Borowski. Plain, unadorned description of what happened in individual places throughout the Shoah, without emotionality, without analysis. Alvin Rosenfeld observes about it, indignation is absent from Borowski's work. For indignation would imply distance or detachment, moral separation. Shock, wonderment, revulsion, or compassion, all likewise absent, would do the same. Such civilized responses would portray the savagery of the concentration camp as a thing apart, and Borowski is intent on showing how terror quickly can therefore become domesticated. But that is complicitous with the terror, an accessory to the crime, when in fact, really, there is only the crime. Victoria Barnett, formerly director of the program on ethics, religion, and the Holocaust at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, is the one who quotes Borowski and Rosenfeld, and she does so to help explore indifference, one of the hallmarks of those who failed to respond to the Holocaust as it happened. She points out that indifference comes in many guises. It can be emotional numbness. It can be routine, just following the routine, just doing the job. It is, in many cases, simply silence. But the common feature of indifference, in whatever guise it takes, is that it works in a universe of parallel worlds. If any of us in the past 6-8 months have seen the film Zone of Interest, we know what those parallel worlds can look like, as that film depicts the life of the commandant of Auschwitz and his family just on the other side of the parallel world inside the camp. But that parallel, whether it's at Auschwitz with the commandant or whether it's at Mount Mauthausen, where the white frame houses also looked out through their kitchen windows on the camp, the parallel that keeps those separate is a fictional creation, because those worlds intersect. They live in the same universe. They exist at the same time. They are part of the same humanity. And so indifference that would construct parallel worlds to keep those apart actually turns out to be a tactic. It's an avoidance. It's a disengagement. But, to paraphrase Rosenfeld, there remains the crime. That crime is, by nearly all accounts, the most enormous crime in human history. Michael Berenbaum again says that the difficulty in engaging it is precisely that it is so alien, that it is so enormous, different in scope, different in intent, different in method. It's what Roy Eckhart called uniquely unique. It's the crime of an entire society. That struck home with me the first time that I was in Berlin, actually in Berlin, and beyond all of the monuments and museums and everything else, churches that I saw, I remember very clearly standing on a street corner at one point, looking around and realizing that for 12 years, that bench was Nazi. That lamppost was Nazi. That fire hydrant was Nazi. That tree was Nazi. And I was recently brought back to the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer late in his life, in his Letters and Papers from Prison, when he said, after all that he had done in resistance, in plot against Hitler's life, in his writings, in his imprisonment, Bonhoeffer said, we just couldn't do enough. We could only do what we could do because he was living in a system in which everybody ended up participating. And perhaps that is where the Holocaust is not entirely unique, where it touches on every human crime or failing or sin. Because what was most alien about the Holocaust was also what is most common. It's a worldview that creates parallel worlds and renders some humans not worth the trouble, or maybe even some humans as the whole reason for the trouble. Now, as Jews and Christians and Muslims and religious people and secular humanists, we know that this is our common and central failing. We know it from the story of Cain and Abel, when Cain might as well have said, oh, do I live in Abel's world? No, that's a parallel world. We know it from the words of God in the Quran, who says, I made you to be different peoples and tribes so that you would get to know each other, not so that you would be separate from one another. We know it because when Jesus predicts his death, he always speaks about the Son of Man will be handed over and killed. And he's using a very Semitic phrase, the Ben Adam, the typical human being. He represents all humanity, just as Adam does when any single human life is extinguished and the whole world is destroyed. Dehumanizing. It's not as grand as that word is. It's just when we think about things in our world existing in parallel worlds that do not affect each other. And we all know that. And we all say that. But somehow then, we also stand ourselves enough away from that, apart from that, still to be able to ask, well, yeah, but isn't that one or that group or that act really the worst? Isn't it really in a different category from the life I live? But when we recognize, as Vicki Barnett says, that the indifference and silence of bystanders had the same effect for the victims as the active hatred of the perpetrators, then the illusion of innocence dissolves. Wherever the crime is, all are complicit. And so, where the crime is, I must respond. I must be changed by recognizing through the enormity and the uniqueness of the Holocaust that I am in some way implicated in any human crime. And the change must be that I work however I can to define and dignify and empower the human, all that is human, in any circumstance. Now that's complicated because humans end up in conflict with each other, and working for what's most human for everyone in the situation will not look like full solidarity with anyone. And it's not easy because there are no guarantees about the outcomes of our work. Think, for example, of some of the most classic examples of those who took action, who did respond in the Holocaust. Think of the village of Le Chambon, where there were hundreds of Jewish children saved to the end of the war with no serious repercussions for the villagers. And then think of Raoul Wallenberg, who similarly saved hundreds and hundreds of people from Budapest, but himself ended up in the gulag of the Soviet Union. Or think of Janusz Korczak, the doctor and orphanage director in Warsaw, who went with his children to Treblinka and saved not one of them and died himself with them. Think of the mother who pleaded for her child with an SS guard and was perfunctorily shot. Think of the prisoner knowing that she was going to the gas chambers and took the small morsel of bread from her pocket that she had been keeping for as long as she had been in the camp and handed it to her friend, not knowing whether that would save her friend or not. We can't know when we make a choice about how to work on humanizing whether it will work at all. But waiting to be certain of what the outcome will be is still just waiting. It's separating ourselves from what's happening. And action can even, frankly, be embarrassing. I remember a story as I was growing up when I was in high school. My family was very involved with the local community theater. And my father, who most often did sound and sets, got asked to play Doc, the drugstore keeper in West Side Story. And Dad had done some community theater back when he was a young adult, early 20s, mid-20s, I think it was. This was a few decades later. And he hadn't been on stage in a while. Now, for any of you who know West Side Story, there's a scene in which Doc, the drugstore owner, comes into the basement of the drugstore when the Jets are, let's say, harassing Anita, one of the Shark girls. More than harassing, really threatening Anita with sexual violence. And Doc's supposed to come into the basement and yell into this scene, "Stop it!" Well, Dad wanted to get it right. So after dinner one evening, as he and Mom were doing the dishes, Dad's practicing. "Stop it!" I don't know if that's quite right. "Stop it!" No, that doesn't sound quite right. "Stop it!" I'm still not sure. And with that, they hear some kind of rustling at the front door. But Dad goes on practicing. "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" Nothing happens at the front door. So finally, he stops it. He goes to the front door, he opens it up, there's nothing there, but he notices that my sister is at the neighbor's. She's at the neighbor's because she got to the front door and the neighbor was on the way back with her to see if he could take action in whatever this horrible, violent thing was that was going on in our house, to which somebody kept yelling, "Stop it!" It's humorous, but it's also embarrassing in the moment. And we don't know when we try to take action how it will be seen or received. It's also humbling because none of us has the whole answer to direct history. We just have to live into it together, day by day. Andrzej Brick did a study of the Nazi ghettos in Poland and noted that the separation that took place when the Nazis went into a Polish city and took the Jews and put them in a ghetto and left the non-Jews out, said the separation between Jews and non-Jews was reinforced by neither having any tangible institutional means to cooperate with each other, which predated the terror. They didn't know each other. That's the day-to-day work. Knitting together tangible, institutional, and human connections that stand against efforts to divide and alienate us, and that stand ready to act when persecution and suffering come. I want to close, since I'm in Jersey, with a Jersey story I know. I taught at Muhlenberg College for 20 years, and we basically got all of our students from a small factory in the tri-state area of New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. And there was one particular young Jewish woman from New Jersey who came to Muhlenberg some time ago now, who this year has been named the Hackensack Middle School Teacher of the Year. When she was at Muhlenberg, she barged her way into a Holocaust trip that I was leading, March of Remembrance and Hope. And while we were in Warsaw, this young Jewish woman who was active in her synagogue, active in Hillel, very alert and aware as a young Jewish woman, heard for the first time the story of Janusz Korczak, that orphanage director who went and died at Treblinka with his students. And she was horrified that as a well-educated, alert, confirmed young Jewish woman, she had never heard about Janusz Korczak. So when she came back, she created a confirmation curriculum that not only offered students at her synagogue the opportunity to learn about Korczak, but then also, importantly, to develop some kind of project that would embody the same kind of care and concern in their community that Korczak showed in his. She's grown into a model educator, grounding her work on the conviction that every child should have heroes and role models and a deep identification with their own culture and respect for others and allies. And so she is an advocate for women in the STEM fields. She was the founder and continues to be the advisor of the Gay-Straight Alliance at the middle school. She is, as her principal said in presenting the award, globally minded and locally conscious. There are crimes underway every day, everywhere. The crime of the Holocaust changed Dee, the teacher, to build connections across every barrier that she sees. The crime of the Holocaust brings communities together this evening to remember, to remember. And every time that we forge and nurture tangible ties of mutual human respect and understanding and support, we remember what it was that the Holocaust tore apart.
Thank you, Reverend Pettit, for the warmth of your wisdom and for being our teacher tonight. The program that you have in front of you is a labor of love that Maureen Nassin, who runs our office here at Temple Israel, does each year. You have no idea how much time she spends putting this together, how picky she is. I don't like the break here. It's things I would never notice. It's cockeye this. I have to do it again. She takes wonderful, wonderful pride in putting this together each week. And Temple Israel has asked if you have a chance to thank her for her work that adds to what we do tonight. I have to tell her tomorrow that I made 3 changes in the program. We had our congressman here. Rabbi Marins played, who I neglected to introduce as the director of interreligious affairs at the American Jewish Committee, played the role of Rabbi David Fine, introducing the speaker. And now I'm introducing Rabbi David Fine, who's playing the role of Rabbi Leir Moser for our, in a moment, we will take a moment of silence in memory of those lost. And after that, we do the Kaddish. And this version of the Kaddish, which is the memorial doxology from Jewish prayer, the words itself are in Aramaic and praise God. The idea behind it is an acceptance of God's sovereignty, an acceptance of things in the world that are beyond our control. And the interspersing of those words with the places of the camp and destruction is jarring. It was put together by Rabbi Jules Harlow, who was a master liturgist in the conservative Jewish denomination, and we lost him just a few months ago. So we'll say these words in his memory, as well as those whom he continues to help us remember. But first, let us rise for a moment of silence. Let's read together. Yitz Gadal, Auschwitz, V'yitz Gadash, Lodz, Shemei Rabbah, Ponyar, Ba'alma Divra Chirutei, Babiyar, V'yamlich Malchutei, Maidanek, V'chayechon Uv'yomechon Birkanau, Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Kovno, Bagala Uv'izman Kariv, Yanovska. V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mavorach Le'olam Olamei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam Buchenwald, v'yitnaseh v'yitadar Treblinka, v'yitaleh v'yitalal Vilna, Shemei de Kudisha Bergen-Belsen, Brichu le'ela Mauthausen, Mikol birchata v'shirata Dachau, Tush bechata v'nechamata Minsk, Damiran ba'alma Warsaw, V'yimru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min Shemaya, V'chaim aleinu v'el kol Yisrael, V'yimru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, Huya seh shalom aleinu, El Kol Yisrael, El Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'yimru, Amen. We can remain standing through the closing, a benediction followed by the closing hymns. Reverend Mack.
Dear Lord, as we depart this place into the night, illuminate our hearts, illuminate our minds, illuminate our angst. Allow us a vulnerability infused with hope, informed by our collective communication. And so in this time of fellowship, may we continue in that illumination, continue seeking each other so that we may never again be stuck in the dark. Amen.
Please join us in the refrain of Zorshoin Kommende Geule. We have three wonderful soloists who will sing the verses tonight: Mary Jo Guchard, Anastasia Swope, and Robert Dworkin.
Ongesuljet oinfien harsten, macht men alle kaim. Oil der Rumet, lotstrit ruhen, singen mir at Lied. Is not kein bisil profin, lomin tricken maim. Maim kaim, it's doch kaim, was dar noch da I. Rosen gelben Minerale, Sonnenschein kommen die Gerule, Sonnenschein kommen die Gerule, Mashiach kommt schon bald, Sonnenschein kommen die Gerule, Sonnenschein kommen die Gerule, Sonnenschein kommen die Gerule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Sie ist ein Dorf von Kohle Chaiv, seid nicht Kinnaronim, und von Sindeken Mashiach Gicher kommen weht. Ach, du Tatelein Himmel, zbeten Merachmonim, ze Mashiach Sonnen kommen, a bissele zu spät. Soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon
tanzen Bäume in der Wälder, Sterne auf den Himmel. Rabbi Israel, der mich unten dreht sich in der Mitte. Zweit sich häufig in Mashiach von seinen tiefen Riemel. Wenn wird der Herrn unser vieladike Lied, und schon kommen die Geula. Soll schon kommen die Geula, soll schon kommen die Geula. Mashiach